Hello and welcome to the KOFISI Connect podcast, your source for a wealth of roundtable discussions on the workplace and business, as well as cultural news and trends from the diverse and dynamic continent of Africa. I'm your host, Georgia Webber, and today I'm very pleased to introduce Michael Aldridge, founder and CEO of KOFISI, a Pan-African platform supporting enterprise through infrastructure, workplace ecosystems and community, as well as Ambassador Reuben Brigety, whose career spans diplomacy, policy and business interest across the African continent, and who I'm very pleased to say will soon be joining the board of KOFISI. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Ambassador, I'll start with you today, if you don't mind. You've worked at the intersection of diplomacy and business across Africa. From your perspective, what has changed most in how global companies view the continent?
Well, what's most stunning is the demographic change that has happened and is going to happen in Africa. So as we sit here today, there are about 1.5 billion people in the 54 nations of the African Union, where the average age of those 1.5 billion people is 19 years old. By the time we get to 2050 in mid-century, which is tomorrow practically, at least 1/4 of humanity will be African, and somewhere between 1/3 to 1/2 of the world's working age population will be African. That's not conjecture. Most of those people have already been born. That is coming. And the nature of the commercial opportunity that presents is simply impossible to ignore for any business that is focused on any one of the massive sectors for growth that this continent represents and that also needs. So that's one thing that's very important. I also think another massive change, say compared to 35 years ago, 40 years ago, is virtually every government on the continent now understands the need to have private sector lead in their development strategy. So ideas of more socialist approaches or state-led approaches to job creations have largely fallen by the wayside. And so understanding that there are going to be private companies and private entrepreneurs that are going to be driving change is very, very important. And I think probably the third thing that connects those two is the imperative for employment. So today, right now, it is estimated that about 9 million young people come of age to enter the formal economy every year, the formal workforce. The UN estimates that Africa as a whole only creates about 3 million new jobs in the formal economy right now. Now, I majored in political science. I didn't major in math in college, but even I can do that math, right? So about a 6 million job deficit per year. And so filling that deficit is of vital importance for the political stability and also for the social mobility of the continent. So it is simultaneously an enormous challenge and an enormous opportunity, and bringing those three things together to understand where the continent is going to go the next 25 years is, I think, the mission that's presented to all of us.
Wow. So Michael, based on what the ambassador has just said, with KOFISI, you operate at the point where global enterprise meets African markets. How would you say what you do now enables what the ambassador is seeking to do?
Yeah, I think it's really great points that are being made. I think the scale of the requirement and the scale of people and jobs that are going to be created isn't completely understood by the rest of the world. I think it's definitely an area of the map that feels as though it has a lack of understanding from the global markets. So to the point of the question sort of somewhat answers itself, because the scale of infrastructure that's required in the African market, certainly that we work in, is huge. I mean, most African cities are between 5 to 8 times undersupplied in buildings to be able to house the number of jobs that would be coming online, on the assumption that most of the jobs are going to be in the white collar areas. And that's really what KOFISI is there to do. I think we're servicing a part of the value chain that's been underinvested, and that's the secondary infrastructure that's required for companies to be productive in their mission. So secondary infrastructure is office space, right? I mean, it's further reaching than office space, but in our context, it's office space. And if you consider that by 2030, 1 in 3 people in the global workforce will be in Africa, that means that if 3 people are waiting in a line to come in for a job interview, 1 of them will be African. And so when you visualize it that way, you know, the amount of desk space that's going to be required is huge. So there's a fundamental need. And then there's in terms of what we're doing, we believe that we are then providing workspaces which create and stimulate better productivity in very established enterprise, as well as inspiring new business. So I think there's going to be 2 major themes that are talked about over the next period, and that's AI and Africa.
Do you think the narrative of Africa as an emerging market will allow enterprise to fully operate at global standards?
Well, it's only emerging for a period. At some point, it will become emerged, and that may well happen faster than we realize. I think that the capacity and the skill sets that exist in the markets is very strong, and technology was easy. In some ways, it was easy to leapfrog into the technology because the mobile phones and the smartphones were made available. The infrastructure was made available. And then, as we know, there's huge technology adoption across these African markets. And in some ways, the leapfrogging has gone too far. And what it's done is it's jumped over the physical infrastructure that technology in developed markets is leveraging. And so that infrastructure is a big part of the change. Energy supply is a big part of the predicament as well. But there's sort of very well documented views on how the pace at which the cost of electricity can fall. And I think once some of these dots are joined together, you're going to see a powerhouse of opportunity in many of these markets.
Can I just add to that, George, if I may? So the question, as I understand it, is when might we reasonably expect to see any number of African businesses operating at global standards? I would argue that we're already seeing many of them. For example, one thinks of Ethiopian Airlines, which is one of the best airlines in the world. Extraordinary. They buy Boeing aircraft by the dozen. Or one thinks of the extraordinarily vibrant creative industry from Lagos to Cape Town, everything from Burna Boy and Black Coffee to Netflix series that are being produced out of film studios in Cape Town, to the emerging fashion brands that are coming out of places like Accra and Nairobi. So obviously here we are in Nairobi, the Silicon Savannah, as it were, in the incredible technological transformation that is happening in sort of this new app economy. So many of these things are already happening right now. And the reason it's relevant to think about the frame that way is that there are very few places on the continent left where it is still possible in the world. Very few places in the world left where the nature of the infrastructure that still needs to be built, the nature of the talent pools that exist, the nature of the ability to transform entire sectors still has that level of promise, combined with where you can still have double-digit economic growth. Now, that is not to say that there aren't challenges. Of course there are. There are non-trivial challenges, not the least of which is that when we're talking about Africa, we're also talking about 54 separate sovereign nations. Most of which have their own separate regulatory environments, language differences, et cetera. But it is to say that the demographic growth in Africa and the commercial opportunities that come in with it is going to be one of the most important stories shaping geopolitical facts in the world in the second half of the 21st century. And now is when the preparation for that change is happening.
I suppose then in context to your answer there, would you say that international companies, what is it that international companies underestimate when they kind of come into African markets? Is it the people? Is it the economics that you were talking about?
There are several things, and obviously the most significant is, as I mentioned, the nature that there are 54 different countries. What that means is, quite frankly, the economies of scales across markets are not as strong as they should be. But that's one of the reasons why the African Continental Free Trade Area is meant to solve. So that if you have a pharmaceutical plant in Botswana that's making aspirin tablets, but you're not simply making aspirin tablets for Botswana, but you could export it across the entirety of SADC, for example, so that geographically those markets begin to make a lot more sense. Another thing, quite frankly, is just the sheer tyranny of distance. Continental Africa is 3 times the size of the continental United States of America. You fit coast to coast the United States of America inside Africa 3 times over and still have space. And so that has real serious implications for logistics, for supply chains, and for helping to develop intra-African trade as well. So that's one thing. I would also say probably another really important challenge that's worth thinking through is that in Europe, in North America, and in parts of Asia, the nature of institutions are so strong and so well developed that it's almost the opposite of what it takes to do business here in Africa, and where you really have to have local knowledge, you really have to be on the ground, and individual relationships matter immensely. And quite frankly, it's one of the things I think that KOFISI gets right. They understand the importance of place, and they understand the importance of person. And they are creating the physical spaces where those sorts of engagements can happen, and therefore where those sorts of economic innovation can continue to take place.
Ambassador, if you think about Europe and the fractions that are kind of happening as we speak, looking forward to a more united Africa, how would you remain positive about such a situation?
Sure. I've thought a lot about this, both because I previously served as the United States ambassador to the African Union, and also in a former life as an academic, I've taught European politics, particularly as it relates to the European Union. So I've thought a lot about how these two enterprises interact. And just super briefly, a little bit of a history lesson. So the origins of the European Union come from the European Economic Community, the European Coal and Steel Community, which were created in the first instance as a means of preventing European countries from going to war again after World War II. And then subsequently moved to economic union, and then subsequently moved to greater amounts of political unity, but they started essentially from that basis. I would argue that the origins of African unity are slightly different. First of all, the predecessor organization of the AU was the Organization for African Unity, whose principal mandate was to rid the continent of colonialism. And then moving towards the AU, the purpose of the AU was to realize the full developmental potential of the continent, of which peace and security is understood as a piece, but it was principally to drive the economic development of Africa for the purpose of uplifting its people. Right? So it's almost like the inverse, as it were, of the project of European unity. And so if you accept that proposition, the African Union is simultaneously simpler, but also more complex than the project of European Union. I'll tell you what I mean by that. It's simpler in this sense. I would argue, first of all, that just philosophically, psychologically, the idea of pan-continental unity has more resonance in Africa than it does in any other region of the world. So while to be European has perhaps something initially much more of a political identity and also a cultural one, to be African is almost a spiritual identity, really, as it relates to the people born of this continent, their collective experience as it relates to both colonialism, their collective experience as it relates to slavery, et cetera. And so this idea of what it means to be African, to be immediately identifiable as African anywhere in the world, I think brings together a greater degree of unity politically than it does in other parts of the world. I would also say that because many of the countries of the continent are more or less in the same economic position, the idea of driving continental unity for the purpose of continental economic uplift is also still very, very relevant. Now, so in some senses, therefore, those political drivers for unity are still very, very palpable in Africa, even as those political drivers for unity are being questioned as constraining opportunities in Europe because of the challenges of the demographic deficit. What makes it more complicated is, start off, the African Union is 50% bigger than the European Union is in terms of sheer numbers of countries, 54 versus I think 29 in the EU or so. And also the nature of trying to figure out how you create regulatory regimes that will facilitate trade in such a way that you actually have differentiated development in manufactured products, in agricultural products or whatnot, so that the actual trade is meaningful. So you're not trading groundnuts from one country to groundnuts in another, right? And that will be developed not only in terms of the natural resources that are inherent in each different country, but also, quite frankly, the particular regulatory frameworks that are developed in different places. I mean, there's a reason why the Silicon Savannah is in Nairobi, right? And not in number of other places. And so I think the idea of a Pan-African brand like KOFISI recognizes the power, the psychological, the political power of Pan-Africanism as a mechanism for driving economic uplift in this continent that both desperately needs it and also has the greatest youth energy of any other place in the world, and is capturing that youth potential and is creating the physical spaces where it can really be realized. It was probably too long of an answer, but
that's a great answer.
I mean, yeah, that's a
great answer.
I'm sure you can edit it.
So, Michael, you're taking KOFISI across the continent. How, and as the ambassador has said, diverse markets, very different countries, run very differently. How, in your experience, how have you been able to design, I suppose, city by city, across borders?
Well, the fundamental principle of the idea is the same in market to market. We sort of often say, once you get past the taxi and the hotel, the next thing you need is a desk. And so it's a universal language. It's a concept that transcends borders, tribal cuts. It's just needed and necessary. The clever bit for us has been what we've put around the desk to encourage greater productivity. And I think that the root psychology of how to have a better work day has been proven to work in markets with variety. So our fundamental goal of building that great work day has been agnostic to market. But our then in-country design, we're very aware of the fact that our user bases in each market are actually very localized. So although our customer base is a lot of international businesses, the majority of their staff inside the location are local workforce, and they have their own particular style and designs and what makes them feel comfortable. So if you're bringing lifestyle into the workspace, you've got to make it the lifestyle of the people who are working there. So although you see, again, going back to the technology, that most of the youthful population and the older population, they've got windows into the world through social media. They still want to work in offices that feel as though they're from home. And that kind of resonates to a different point, that my belief is that, the great talent that's here on the continent wants to be successful working inside the continent, not having to leave the continent to achieve that success. So I think in another way, one thing that we're doing with KOFISI is assisting job creation, but we're also assisting opportunity for people to be able to operate in a way and at a standard that has been commonly accepted as the right way, as well as then lacing in innovation, which I think that when you look at like our latest locations, KOFISI Kazkazi, the degree of innovation that we have in there is market leading globally. And I think it's just brilliant that those workspaces are now being made available to this amazing workforce in Nairobi.
You've also, KOFISI has also recently announced that it's just signed Workspace in Dubai at
That's
Expo
correct.
City.
Yeah.
So just explain, I suppose, where you see the opportunities for collaboration between the continent, and maybe Ambassador, you can pick up on that as well, between the Middle East and the continent of Africa.
Yeah, I think that we've always seen that as one corridor. There's a lot of historical relationship between the Middle East and Africa, particularly in the north, still is today. Strong relationships between the territories historically, and there's a trade flow, there's a talent flow, there's a capital flow that's coming through that market. So we are now operating in North, South, East, West Africa. We see this move into the Middle East as a very natural step into a fifth zone for us, where for different reasons, it's still an emerging environment. It's a very highly financed emerging environment, but it's still learning and it's making mistakes as it goes along and succeeding in a lot of things. It's an extraordinary environment to be able to now operate in, and we feel very at home there, and we are excited to be able to solve productivity in those markets. And also, we're delighted with the fact that we're bringing a African brand into the Middle East, which I think is a great credit to the team for the work they've done, that we can operate in that global standard in those markets. So it's a big project. We've been working on it for over a year, just to get things going, and it will open later this year. But it's a very big step for us as a brand.
So the ties between the Middle East and Africa are centuries old. Everything from the spread of Islam across the Maghreb to Swahili itself, which has many Arabic influences. And so in many respects, what we're seeing right now is simply the modern interpretation of that century-long dialogue between the Middle East and between Africa. So trading routes are centuries old, and in many ways, what KOFISI is doing with its setup at Expo City in Dubai is creating a physical space that is reminiscent of this trade dialogue between Africans and Arabs in the Middle East. We know there is a lot of investment interest amongst many nations in the Middle East, from the Emirates to Qatar to Bahrain, others that are looking for and are actually engaged in a number of large-scale investments across the continent. And so I frankly see the signing of the agreement to place a KOFISI property in Dubai as the first of probably multiple steps coming forward, given the trend lines that we're seeing.
So, Ambassador, you were talking earlier, about people and talent, mobility. How important is trust, both institutional and cultural, in enabling that kind of movement?
In diplomacy, one of my mentors told me years ago, in diplomacy, the coin of the realm is trust, and you cannot surge trust. You have to build it before you need it. And so one of the things that KOFISI is doing is building a brand, and building a brand means essentially creating a trusting relationship between the brand owner and the brand consumer. And that type of trusting relationship comes from consistency over time. By definition, consistency is over time, but consistency over time. And so KOFISI is creating a brand that creates spaces for people to create, to engage, to meet, to grow together in multiple cultural environments across the continent, and then linking that also as well to the Middle East. And so I think this is a reservoir of trust that will only become stronger over time as it demonstrates consistency and excellence in delivery and creating a first-class product. And I think that that trust will only help to strengthen the brand of KOFISI over time as well.
Fantastic. Maybe, Mike, you could talk a bit about that as well in the context of KOFISI, the element of enabling sort of talent mobility in a company like KOFISI, and how important the consistency of the brand is in building a brand like KOFISI across Africa.
Our job is to facilitate businesses and enterprise to be able to do the best they can with a day. And I think the way that we've designed our spaces also helps companies who have workspace inside KOFISI. They're able to attract better talent because of the facilities that we're providing. And it's a smart move by enterprise to outsource what has become quite a complex undertaking, which is to answer these dozens of demands that the modern workforce requires: flexibility, variety, stimulation, facilities, sustainability, technology, etc. And so it's just smart business to be able to leverage a much bigger capacity rather than having to invest in it yourself. And there aren't many companies who will or who can invest in that way. So I think, first of all, we are echoing that point because we are encouraging the best from individuals, and therefore the talent is getting an opportunity to breathe. We believe very heavily in this as an organization, as a company, because we want to have the most talented service staff in market providing this version of hospitality inside a workspace. And to do that, we've invested very heavily in our own training academy to be able to ensure not only that individuals are serving in the same way, but also that they're learning and developing, which, in itself is a long journey, because we're talking about doing something that hasn't been done before in these markets. So, it's difficult to have peer references when it doesn't exist. So we're very proud of our academy, and we're very proud of our staff that have come through that training module. So I think talent management is going to be, it's a parallel requirement when you consider the scale of the workforce that is coming through.
And how would you, I suppose, say your business model is having an impact on the kind of clients you attract? How is your business model impacting the workforce?
Oh, in a very positive way. I think that we're offering something that just didn't exist before, and it's compelling for the procurer or the company as much as it is delightful for the individuals who come to work inside it, because that's what we do. That's what we are maniacal about, wanting to make the day as good as it can be. We're obsessed by that.
I suppose I was but it's the size of the type of clients that you look after in your spaces.
Well, I think that it's feasible, and I couldn't speak directly, but in terms of the general sense that we have from customers, is that they didn't believe that it was that this kind of facility existed. It's easier for them to mobilize. It's easier for them to get going and to concentrate on their main product. So we're definitely directly correlated to GDP improvement. We've mobilized some big names across multiple markets and made their capacity occur much quicker than if they were to believe that they were doing it themselves. So I think if that's an answer that I can give to your question, that's one way to look at it.
Can I just also add, one of the things that impresses me about KOFISI and its business model is that it's setting the standard. So by creating a level of workplace experience that simply doesn't exist, and doing so in multiple markets, that then is the standard that not only becomes a trusted brand for people that are moving in a Pan-African fashion from one market to another, so working for the same company from Lagos to Nairobi to Johannesburg. But if that is now the standard, that then raises the standard that other companies are going to have to work to try to meet. And all of that collectively helps to strengthen the professionalization of this young and increasingly diverse and increasingly energetic workforce that is going to be coming of age on the continent over the course of the next 25 years.
What excites you, Ambassador, most about the kind of next decade of business growth across the continent, would you say?
So I am really excited by the sheer pace of growth that is already happening and absolutely is going to accelerate. We have not seen this level of demographic growth anywhere in the history of humanity. And this is going to be incredibly exciting. Let me also say, we've not seen this level of demographic growth coupled with the same quality and speed of technological change at the same time.
Yeah.
Not even the Industrial Revolution, I would argue, is comparable. And so those that are here clearly understand it. And quite frankly, one of my jobs in my current role as president of Usara Advisors is to help to translate the nature of that energetic, dynamic growth to other business leaders outside of Africa so that they understand that this is, without question, one of the most important commercial stories that's going to be happening in the 21st century.
I suppose this same question is relevant to you, Michael. What kind of excites you most about the next decade of business growth for KOFISI or for any other?
Well,
locating here.
I'm a 3-time entrepreneur in terms of building businesses, and I couldn't think of a more exciting environment to be able to operate in. I was asked this morning my story again about how I ended up here, and I concluded with the point that when I did arrive, the minute within an hour of being on the ground here, this is where I need to work, because there's an opportunity to bring creativity together with commercial. Everything you do is affecting change, and you're doing that in amongst a really energized environment. And I'm 12 years into this journey now, and I still feel the same way every day when I get up. And I feel really blessed and very welcomed by both Kenya and the continent to have had that opportunity. But I think it's going to be the most exciting time for the next part of the journey. You're starting to see a lot of things flower that weren't possible when we first arrived. You know, when I first started here 10 years ago, there was no Uber, there was no Booking.com, there was no Airbnb, there were no expressways, and there was a handful of restaurants. And now we're seeing, as you know, KOFISI, we support a number of ventures in the arts, from artists to music. We're just seeing some of the most exciting stuff arrive, and you feel as though you're in the melting pot of change. And so, we're just really delighted to be part of that fabric. And I think that we're also a contributor to showing what can be possible from the continent. Because what you have to remember with KOFISI is this has been built by an African team. We have 350 staff in the business. 97% of them are from Africa, and it's a testament to the skill and their energy and tenacity that we are where we are. We're one big family with this mission, and I think that we're excited about where we can go to over the next decade, because there's so much to do.
Ambassador, we're excited to welcome you to the board. What is it you think you'll be looking forward to most about the business and being involved?
Well, first of all, I'm deeply honored to have been invited to join the board. I'm honored to be invited to join this journey. I'm honored that Michael and others feel that I have something to contribute to this particular journey. I happen to think that one of the skills that I can bring to KOFISI is helping to serve as a bridge between non-African businesses that are looking to figure out how and where to engage on the continent, and helping KOFISI to better understand their needs, and then also sort of bringing together in ways that that are mutually beneficial. With as well something of an understanding of the continent politically and economically, and so I'm just thrilled to be part of this journey.
Fantastic.
I think that we were talking late this week about strategy in Africa, and I was saying how there are many great moments and thoughts that you can have to make things work in this continent. You know, not least being very focused. So probably the number one rule, but I think two other rules. One is the capacity for proximity and actually getting close to where the issue sits. So, the ambassador and I were talking about this, in that there's a lot of commentary that's made about the markets from people who actually haven't spent enough time on the ground. And it's that distance between the story and the real opportunity that is the entrepreneur's, pocket. But in order for it to grow on the ground, we actually have to be able to get people more proximate to what's actually happening. The third thing in this story, though, is to be good. You asked me about continental Africa and being a continental brand. I think to be a continental brand in Africa, you have to be as good outside the continent as you are inside. You have to be able to reach the influence outside. A lot of our clients come from outside. Our capital flows come from outside. And so I think having the ambassador now involved with his base in Washington and understanding what the organizations are doing and where the narrative is sitting, I think together we can form a very powerful partnership, because we can help shape the debate from the operator's point of view. So it's a great credit to him to be involved with what we're doing, because, alongside his own ventures, this is one of a few platforms that are pan-African and has a real opportunity to actually campaign for more understanding of the continent.
Ambassador Brigety, Michael Aldridge, thank you both very much for speaking with me today. And we look forward to speaking with you in the near future and for going on the joint journey with KOFISI.
Asante Sana. Thank you very much.
Sana.